Hey, what is up guys? It is your boy Speed here, and today we're going to be talking about Weaver. This is one of the most dominant carries in the current meta, and I honestly felt as I was watching a few pro games, and then I compared them to some 3K, 4K games, I wasn't seeing nearly as much Weaver as I would have expected. Pros are really taking advantage of how strong this hero actually is, and I feel like a lot of you guys might not be yet, and so this video hopefully will inspire you to do exactly that and win some games. Alright, before we get into it, if you guys could smash the like button and subscribe to the channel, it obviously helps us out a lot. On top of that, I just want to let you know I'm making a lot of awesome content. In fact, I just made a motivational speech over on the gameleap website that I think you guys are going to really enjoy. So if you like getting hyped up for your matches and really just getting put in the right headspace to win solo queue, which I would argue is the most important thing to win solo queue, then go check out the gameleap website. Sign up right now down below. You're really missing out if you haven't. Alright, so hopping into it, why Weaver? What changed? Well, the first thing that changed that we will be discussing throughout the video is the item build. This hero now rushes a Maelstrom and rarely buys boots. Now, you can buy boots still, right? For a lot of people who don't know Weaver or aren't familiar with the hero, Sakuchi gives you a flat amount of movement speed, and it uncaps the movement speed. So, you do get boots movement speed, right? It's not like when you buy boots on old Weaver, you would just get capped out and it'd be a waste of gold. That's not the case anymore, and so boots are solid, but a lot of people feel that just going Sanjin Yasha is more than enough movement speed. And on top of that, people are rushing Maelstrom, and the reason why Maelstrom is good is the item was buffed. It's raw damage on a hero that has Gemini attack, so obviously, you know, it's a very high DPS item. Maelstrom naturally needs attack speed, and Weaver doesn't necessarily quote-unquote have attack speed, but he has Gemini attack to take advantage of that. And then yeah, Sanjin Yasha just makes you really tanky. Now another thing that I think people really like about Weaver is the hero's raw ability to just lane well in almost any matchup. The hero has very little bad matchups, and for one main reason, right? Well, actually, no, there's a few, but there's one in particular that I think is really, really important, and that's his ability to secure range creeps. Now you might be saying, Speed, a lot of heroes have this, but Weaver has one of the safest ways of doing it, right? Sakuchi. It's one of the higher damage nukes at level 1 at 100, right? It's up there. It's a low cooldown, and it obviously makes you go invis and run really quickly, and a lot of heroes just don't have this luxury. They don't have the capability to keep themselves safe and secure creeps at the same time, and Weaver, he's so good at that. And because he's good at that, it allows your support to do whatever they want. And this is very common in the meta, where your support is going to have to be contesting pulls, pulling themselves, and so Weaver is really a very good 1v1 hero in a lot of scenarios. Now, there's two main starting builds that you can go. What I mean by that is there's like these mini items you can build into. So Stick is always good if they're going to be spamming spells. Stick is always good. However, the two builds that people kind of differentiate upon is Wraithbands and Falcon Blade. And how do you know what you should go for? Well, honestly, here's what I think. If the enemy lane is going to cast a lot of spells, guaranteed, I think you can get away with a Stick for your overall mana. However, from what I've seen in general, most players do prefer the Falcon Blade. Why? Because it makes you quite a bit more tanky than Wraithbands, and it gives you a lot more mana regen. 1.8, Wraithbands obviously give you 0. Now you might be asking, Speed, but you know, if you need the mana regen, right? This is a hero that simply requires a ton of mana. How can you ever get away with this build, and why would you ever consider going Wraithbands? Well, Wraithbands are a much better trading item early into the lane. They're much better for manning up. Keep in mind, Wraithband gives you 5 attack speed and 1.5 armor. I also didn't show you, but if we go back to the start of the game, he picked up 2 kills at the rune. So they ended up killing off this Earthshaker and the OD at the end of the day. And yeah, obviously that is a big deal, right? That's gonna change how you look at your item build. So when you're this strong with this much of a gold influx, you can invest into items that allow you to push your advantage in lane. You see what I'm saying? Right? A Falcon Blade, it's like decent build up, right? It's okay, it's alright, but it's not nearly as good of a spike as a Wraithband is. And so you'll see this, you know, with this Wraithband and this Stick, as well as some extra tangos he ships out, he's able to put a lot of pressure onto this OD, and I mean a lot of pressure onto this OD. Now, the scariest thing about Weaver as a hero is always his ability to stay ahead when he gets ahead. You'll see right here, they dive this OD, they pick up the kill. A well-executed gank, nothing too crazy to talk about. He's been chipping him down this whole lane, taking a lot of trades, and I mean a lot of trades, because he bought a Stick Wraithband. He naturally wants to trade with these items, but getting back to my point, when you get ahead as this hero, you often stay ahead. You can see he asked for a shared tango here, right? Just a nice heads up play, top himself off. After that, he's going to immediately look to go on the Sodi, and I love this, right? To me, this is a big sign of high MMR players. And you might be saying, Speed, I know, go on the person when you're ahead, but do you do it? And how fast do you do it? This is the difference between a 6 and a 7k MMR player, or a 3 and a 4k MMR player. How quickly do you take advantage of your spikes? How quickly do you take advantage of the fact that you have 34 CS and the OD, you know, it likely has much less, 21, and a death? How often? How quickly? And that really is a big deal. I don't think people understand how big of a deal this actually is. And because of that, he's able to quickly chip down this OD to half HP, and you notice they're going to rinse repeat this execution, right? And this is good Dota. Most players, when they go for kills and they want to pressure in lane in general, it's one and done. It's all in or nothing. And that's not good. It's actually extremely bad. In fact, it largely gets you killed. And so instead, this sort of like in and out, kite in and out, and put pressure on and off is much better. Now here, he ends up getting TP'd on. It's a nice play by the Earthshaker, but he can heal up, pop a stick, he has a salve on the Hoodwinked, and he's going to be able to do it over and over and over again. Weaver obviously has no cooldowns. He doesn't have to wait for spin or anything like that, and you'll see them immediately dive again. And by the way, it doesn't end there. This is what I'm talking about, though. This hero is insane. You can see this player, who, by the way, I forgot to say it earlier, but this player who's ranked 35 is diving again, and he knows his exact limits. When you're playing Weaver, you need to test your limits. If you are panicking, you are not optimizing your hero. So as he's diving here, he's not going to time-lapse until he absolutely has to. He's a little bit afraid of getting Astral there and dying, so then finally he pops it and picks up another kill. Also, one thing I want to say is Weaver, that's a really important tip, is that you need to ask your supports for salves and clarities at all times. Why? Because your hero has no sustain. It's the largest issue with Weaver as a hero. So if you do not ask your support ahead of time, if you do not tell your support, hey man, I need you to buy salves, plenty of clarities and mangoes for me throughout this lane, you are going to struggle. You will. And you might be saying, oh, but Speed, why can't I do it for myself? Because you really want to hit this Maelstrom timing as soon as possible. Weaver, as a hero, doesn't necessarily farm that fast, but when he has Maelstrom, you can clear out camps quite quickly, and so it's really all about getting to that time as soon as possible, and you'll see his Hoodwink clarities him, salves him, then he finds a neutral item, which is also crucial on Weaver. Most neutral items in the tier 1 give some sort of mana, right? Keen Optic, Fairy Trinket, Jelly, and I think there's some I'm missing. So the next items that he goes are items I recommend you go every game as well, which is Raindrops and a Wand. Talked about it, no sustain, you have a hard time surviving, he even just died to OD. He kind of just like, it was actually shocking, the OD just ultied him and he barely died, but these items are always going to be the difference on Weaver. I really mean it. They're the difference between getting off an extra Sakuchi, dying, it's just such a big deal. For instance, right here, as we look at this situation, he gets gone on, right? Right away, blocks a damage source of the Fissure, right? So there's the Raindrop coming into play. Now he has this wand, which makes him a bit tankier. On top of that, you're going to see his Raindrop comes off cooldown again and blocks a damage instance of the Meteor Hammer, and that allows him to kill off this Earthshaker and move on to the ODs. So just please, guys, buy these items because you're going to notice they are going to consistently be the difference between you being able to chase or not. Now in this game, he does decide to go Boots, and really I would recommend going Boots in most games as well. I think the attack speed of Maelstrom is quite good. But what I will say is when you have an IO on your team, you don't have to. I know that's very specific, but it's one of the most popular combos in Dota right now, and I definitely recommend giving it a shot if you haven't considered it already. A lot of pros are running it, and it's really because IO gets the movement speed from the Weaver. Weaver has sustain issues, IO solves that, and Weaver has a bit of farming issues, but with an IO, that is far from the case. It is actually insane how you will not have sustain issues with an IO, and you won't have farming issues because IO's overcharge is Spell Amp. The next thing I want to talk about is a really useful tip to know how much you should be fighting on a carry. I think a lot of the time when people are playing heroes like Weaver, Jug, Slark, even Troll, they really struggle to know how much should I fight and how much should I farm, because your heroes can do both, right, quite effectively. Now here, he shows up to a fight, he's very strong, right? Weaver is a hero you naturally want to fight as. Unfortunately, he gets off the time lapse and gets clipped by a Meteor Hammer, which causes him to get chain stunned and die. However, I think that's a good play. You might be saying, Speed, come on, what does that even mean? That makes literally no sense. The purpose of this channel and the purpose of these videos is to, well, I guess enjoy the game of Dota, but most importantly, educate yourself on how to get better. And so when I talk to a lot of my students about getting better, right, my private coaching students, what I do is I really encourage them to take a lot of risk. Because if you don't, and I really go in depth with them about this, but if you don't, what happens, guys? You just stay the same. You just stay the same. So I really love this play. You buy fighting items, you buy your treads, wand, raindrops, get your neutral item, and you go in, right? It's going to teach you to push your limits. It's going to teach you how to kite out and pay attention to spells. For instance, there, he could have positioned a little bit better against the Meteor Hammer, and who knows, he might have lived. There's a pretty high chance he would have lived. He's a Weaver after all, but he ends up going down. However, let's finish off the question of how often do I fight and how often do I farm? Well, I like this idea of the one death rule. It's a good place to start, right? It's not a guarantee, but you'll see here, he ends up going down. His team's probably a little bit tilted. He's like, uh-oh, I guess they can kill me. And now he's going to slow down the pace of the game and farm. On top of that, he doesn't have TP, so it would be really awkward for him to go fight immediately after having no TP. Naturally, you want to farm this camp after dying on this side of the map, right? When you're on Radiant, this is the natural farming rotation after dying. But yeah, just keep that in mind. It's like the one death rule, right? I'm not saying you can't ever fight afterwards. Just keep in mind, after dying, you know, you're often going to lose your edge. You're going to lose your ability to take these fights. And so instead, slow down the pace of the game, hit it on item timing, or wait for the enemy team to dive a tower and then fight. But don't force engagements. Next up, one thing I do want to say is it's totally okay to bug ancient camps. I wouldn't really recommend bugging any other camps unless you're taking a stack, but against an ancient camp, being able to reduce their armor and shred them is very important. Also, if you guys aren't familiar with what Weaver spells do in general, I think a lot of people do get confused. I'm sure a lot of you know what Sakuchi is. It makes you run fast and does damage when you run through people. One of the more confusing ones is Gemini attack. Every 3 seconds when it's maxed out, you throw out an extra auto attack, and that extra auto attack does bonus damage. It's quite a lot of bonus damage as well, 40 damage right up, potentially 55 on a 3-second cooldown, which is a ton. And then the swarm is very weird. The bug does damage and reduces armor every time it attacks by 1. It's a lot of armor reduction, and honestly, I would even argue it's Weaver's best spell, so please don't waste it in team fights. Honestly, one of the most underrated features or you know, abilities that you have to be able to execute on that pros do that other players don't is multi-man swarms. Like, people don't angle their swarms to hit multiple heroes, they kind of just chuck them out willy-nilly, and that's quite bad. Now, the next reason why Weaver is a really good hero is his ability to Rosh. In this upcoming engagement here, you're going to see he takes out the backline, picks up a couple kills, doesn't have to force his BKB. It's a nice little engagement for the boys, things are going pretty well. But what I really want to focus on is not that, it's the Roshan. Why is Roshan important, and why is Weaver such a popular pick in the pro scene? It's because he does everything. He has a solid lane, he's good at fighting, he scales well right now, he's a very versatile hero, and he's a great Roshan hero. A hero like Slark can't really Rosh, he provides very little to Rosh. But when you're playing Weaver, here's what you need to do. You need to Belg Rosh. Seems pretty self-explanatory, it reduces the armor, right? But when you bug Roshan, you need to make sure someone is tanking Rosh. Otherwise, the bug will die and you'll lose all the value. You need to keep the bug on Roshan for the full duration to reduce the armor. All right, so you're going to see here, the Pango is going to tank. They also have Pango, so, you know, he can simply do that. The bug does end up tanking some autos here, and do keep in mind, if you mess up and you swarm, you can actually aggro Rosh by pulling creep aggro off any hero on the map. Remember, creep aggro is global, so you can actually aggro Roshan from any hero, anywhere. Next up, let's talk about an absolute psycho play that this player makes. It's really crazy, it is a crazy play, but I'd like to talk about why it's actually smart and not just a complete psycho maneuver. So he ends up going on this Earthshaker here. He goes a Gleipnir Rush build, which is not something you see every day. Most games, you're going to see Maelstrom into Sanjin Yasha or Maelstrom into BKB. I can get behind the BKB this game. The enemy team, they really do have a good way of bursting him. They have Storm Orchid and Echo Slam, right, Blink Echo. And so I do respect the fact that he just thinks that, okay, I might just get bursted, so BKB is the safer option. And I think a lot of players actually go Sanjin Yasha when they should be going BKB. But moving on, after that, usually people don't actually upgrade the Maelstrom into Mjolnir or Gleipnir. Typically they go into items like Scotty or even Abyssal Blade, early Abyssal Blade, just for lockdown purposes, as Weaver can sometimes struggle to keep people in place. But upcoming here, I like this clip. He's diving. This is what I mean by taking chances. And I know it's like, Speed, but wouldn't you yell at me for diving at tier 3? Yeah, I probably would, but let's look at the circumstances. This troll doesn't threaten Weaver. Why? Because Weaver can time-lapse out of roots. I didn't know that originally. until recently actually, but you can time-lapse out of roots, so Troll is really not that much of an issue until he is Basher, which I don't think he does. Yeah, he doesn't. Well, he's building it, but he doesn't have it yet. Also, he knows what the Earthshaker does and does not have. He knows that the Earthshaker recently committed Fissure, and so as long as he pops a Speakeasy to avoid the Echo into the Enchant Totem, he can kill the Shaker. And it seems like a cycle play, but as I said before, he can continue to chase this Troll. Troll unfortunately runs out of mana and dies as well, and the only reason why he can make that play is because of how the root mechanic works and because he has Aegis. Now, once you get a hunt on Weaver, you really never want to stop putting aggression. And that doesn't mean run at every single hero you see, it just means farm waves aggressively. Push in waves constantly. Your hero is one of the best wave shovers in Dota, especially when the enemy team has no way of picking you off. This game, the enemy team actually does. They have Storm. It's one of the, honestly, I think Storm is one of the better heroes against Weaver. But at the end of the day, when you get ahead, your hero is just a menace, an absolute menace. Oh, by the way, whew, that is dirty. One of the most annoying things about bugs, which we'll talk about in a second. But keep putting pressure, run at people, kick them out of side lanes, TP back, run, run at safe laners. Most heroes cannot 1v1 against Weaver because they can't actually stay on top of him ever. He kites in and out so effectively, and bugs is just such an annoying ability. So right here, you'll see that comes into play, right? Goes in with the Q, gets stuck onto the Storm, and Storm can't actually kill it. And there's nothing that disjoints the bug besides Invis, right? And so, unless they have Invis, they can't get rid of it. And one thing I will say about this Gleipnir, even though it is super uncommon, I can kind of get behind it because it does create a lot of value around your Swarm. As I talked about earlier, Swarm is a very easy spell to miss. It's slow. It travels quite slow. And so look at this great Swarm though. It doesn't hit the Troll, but he hits the ranged heroes. And the low attack speed ranged heroes in particular are great, but really any low attack speed hero in general. And it's going to destroy them. You notice these bugs, it might not seem like a big deal. Unfortunately, ODs does get purged by the Invis. But, for a lot of heroes, if they get bugged in a fight and they can't kill it effectively, it actually just completely ruins their fight. It does a lot of damage, and they'll go way into the negative in terms of armor. But even here, I like this, one of the last clips of the game, but I really love this here. As the Storm ends up getting gone on, I do really love how he times the bugs here. And you might be saying, oh, but, it doesn't stun Storm, and Storm can disengage. But it prevents Storm from overcommitting too hard. Because if he does, he'll have no armor. And let's take a look at how this plays out, because the Storm does commit. Storm sees that everyone is low. He obviously wants to try to kill them. So that's exactly what he's going to do, continuing to commit deeper and deeper. But you'll see his armor continues in that trend as well. He runs out of mana and is currently sitting at negative 16 armor. And look at these auto attacks. Yep. That's Weaver in a nutshell. Now for his next item, he ends up going back for the Scotty. After Scotty, typically you'll go an item like Daedalus or Abyssal Blade if you do need more lockdown. I think Nullifier is okay as well, as you'll see a lot of Ghost Scepters against yourself, and so I think it is a solid counter to that. But yeah, typically Daedalus is very, very common. Deso is okay, but honestly, Maelstrom is just such a good item for farming and fighting that you're going to see very little Deso. I don't recommend you buy it almost ever. Even though it was the old Weaver build, I just think it's outdated at this point. Alright, that's going to be all for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed and are inspired to play a little Weaver. This is one of the stronger heroes of the patch, and I recommend you give it a shot. I'll see you in the next one, and I'm out. Peace! And that's all, but remember, before you leave, before you tune out, subscribe to the gameleap website, where we are going to help you get to the next rank. If you're stuck, click the link down below, and I'm out. Peace!